Hello, friends, and welcome to Adventures in Pixieland Bible Study Part 2, where we are still in the NIV. You guys are going to have to deal with that through the end of 2025. Just, if it's crappy, I'm going to read why it's crappy. Because what happens is once I'm all the way through the NIV, and we have to go through the KJV, I'm going to start going, hey, in the NIV, they this, and the KJV, they that, and then the people who don't like the NIV, you're going to enjoy that. So just, you'll be all right. Because that's part of the point of this, is a comparison. But you got to start with one, and then compare. You got to read the whole one, okay? So yet again, Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 1 through 16. By faith is this first parable. Now, faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. Yeah, faith is faith. Faith doesn't require the 3D proof. This is what the ancients were commended for. Okay? Remember, I told you there's like that part, actually in Matthew, a couple days ago, where he takes Peter, John, and James up the mountain, and he gets to see him talking to Moses and Elijah. And then you find out that Elijah was reborn in John the Baptist. So, like I said, it was like that moment in the edit of the Empire, not the Empire Strikes Back, the Return of the Jedi. Right, the last one. Right? It's like that. So those ancients, as well as Abraham and Daniel, David, the big ones, big faith ones. Big faith ones. That's who they mean by the ancients. Because he's like, remember, the writer of this is somebody who is Jewish, who was running around seeking his Messiah, found Jesus, correctly saw him as the Messiah, and then is writing this letter to help other people who also were raised Jewish to stay in their Christian faith despite the pressure from their families that would have invariably been there, and their friends and their society that they've grown up in, so the people they've known their whole life, telling them to repent and come back to the Jewish faith. So it's written by a Hebrew to a Hebrew, and it's what they mean when they say in fulfillment of the scriptures. This is why we got to read the Old Testament next year. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. Atoms are not naked to the visible eye. Science doesn't disagree with this. A big bang is atoms colliding. By faith, Abel offered God a better sacrifice than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as a righteous man when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, he still speaks even though he is dead. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. Before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it was impossible to please God because there were no Mosaic laws. So these people who are being commended by faith had no law to tell them how to be faith. There wasn't any 10 commandments. They didn't have any moral quick codes to live by. Right? In our days, the memes, the motivational memes, they didn't have any of those things. They didn't exist. They only had what was in them and their connection to source, which I found out is a tenet of evangelical preaching. So some of it took, the style took. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. That's really what it is. If you go, well, if God does this, then I'll do that thing that he said. But you're gonna, like, no, it doesn't work like that. God said do this thing, so I did this thing. Child, I'm so glad you did this thing. Here's your reward. Like, oh, look, you picked up your toys. Yes, you can have a cookie. But by faith, Noah was warned about things not yet seen. And holy fear, he built an ark to save his family. By faith, he condemned the world and became the heir of righteousness that becomes by faith. Right? Because the flood wiped out. Noah had 3 sons. There were 3 females. So, like, everybody in Egypt is the descendants of Ham. All the Jewish people are the descendants of Shem. Like, all of them. Like, Abraham comes from Shem. So all the people of Israeli, Judah, like separate countries, doesn't matter. What we think of as the Jewish faith these days. It really just comes after multiple diasporas, multiple conquerings. But was the original faith with Abraham? All them. They're from Shem. Okay, so there were 3 sons. So we're talking about everybody in the Middle East. It's from one of 3, the children of Noah. Okay? So, internal wars. It is internal civil wars. That's why it doesn't necessarily make sense to us. By faith of Noah was warned about things not yet seen. In holy fear built an ark to save his family. By faith he condemned the world and became the heir of righteousness that comes by faith. By faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. Just picked up his family and left. By faith, he made his home in the promised land. He made his home in this promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. He brought himself and his descendants to the area that God told him to go to. Because later, even though they could have no children, his descendants would be as numerous as the stars. And he's not really wrong, because of where he took them to and where the DNA says that his descendants went, including this one right here talking to you. By faith, Abraham, even though he was past age and Sarah herself was barren, was enabled to become a father, because or by faith, even Sarah, who was past age, was enabled to bear children because it did require both of them to have faith. She was hosting the baby, as this is what mothers do, right? That's where the baby grows, inside of a womb, usually. I'm not saying babies born in labs aren't real babies. God decide. God puts souls in bodies. We don't put souls in bodies. So God decides what bodies get souls and what don't. And I'm sorry if you've ever, like me, have had a miscarriage or experienced anything of that nature. It can be very painful. So I'm very sorry if I, accidentally triggered you or anything like that. Not the intention. But Sarah had to have faith as well. As strong of faith that it could happen as Abraham. Otherwise, her lack of faith could have kept it from happening. Just like Jesus couldn't heal the sick in Nazareth because they couldn't see him as anything other than what he was in the past, what they knew him as, instead of who he actually was. They couldn't see his soul. They could only see the vessel. And that's the problem. They couldn't recognize, just like the Pharisees couldn't recognize. People tend to see what they want to see. Verse 12. And so from this one man, as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sands on the seashore. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance. And they admitted they were aliens and strangers on the earth. Because people who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had an opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he had prepared a city for them. And that is all very true. Because what this means is they went where God sent them because they had faith in God. They looked at where God sent them and said, yeah, God, I can see it. I can see it. You're saying if I want this, I got to lay the foundation. And to do that, I got to listen careful and lay the foundation in the way you say. And they said, yes, Lord. The way that Mother Mary heard from the angel and said, but I've never had intimate relations with a man. And they said, don't worry about that. We know what's going to happen, but we need your consent. Because even God sent a messenger to ask for consent. And it was Mary's, behold, I am a handmaiden of the Lord, that made Jesus even be able to be. Right? Because everybody involved needs to be willing. Because the willingness to change is how you express the faith. Because you understand that he's going to continue to guide you as long as you're going to continue to listen for him. Till tomorrow, friends.